Raiders attacked a defenseless ranch. They froze when they spotted the white buffalo hide on the fence. The family who lived there wanted distance from noise and trouble, and they found it in this open, lonely space. Every morning began the same way, with soft light touching the fields and the sound of animals waking for the day. Life moved slowly, guided by routine and patience. The ranch was not large or impressive. The house was old but strong, built with care many years ago. Its walls carried marks of weather and time, telling stories without words. The fence around the land was simple, made to guide animals, not to stop people. There were no signs warning others to stay away, no symbols of power or wealth. To most travelers, the ranch looked ordinary, maybe even forgotten. The family believed in honest work. They rose early, worked until the sun stood high, rested briefly, then continued until evening shadows stretched across the ground. Their days were shaped by seasons, not by clocks. They fixed what broke, reused what they could, and wasted nothing. Every animal was cared for with respect. Every part of the land was treated as something borrowed, not owned. The head of the family had learned this way of life from elders who believed the land listened and remembered. He taught his children that silence had value and that not every strength needed to be shown. His words were calm, but they stayed with those who heard them. The family did not speak much about the past, yet it lived quietly in their actions. There was history here, deep and steady, even if it was not written down. Visitors were rare. Sometimes a traveler passed by, stopping only to ask for water or directions. The family never turned anyone away. They believed kindness was a form of protection, though they never said it out loud. When people left, they often glanced back at the ranch, feeling something they could not explain. It was not fear, but it was not comfort either. To those who looked only on the surface, the ranch seemed defenseless. There were no watchful guards, no locked gates, no signs of readiness. The family did not carry themselves like people expecting trouble. Their calm made the place look open, almost inviting. In a world where many relied on display and control, this quiet confidence went unnoticed. The land itself added to this feeling. Rolling fields stretched outward, offering no hiding places, no sharp edges. At night, the stars filled the sky so completely that it felt like the world was wider than it should be. During the day, the wind moved freely, carrying dust and the smell of grass. Everything about the place suggested honesty and exposure. The family was aware of this, but they did not worry. They believed that those who came with bad intent often revealed themselves before taking a step too far. Not every warning needed to be loud. Some were placed gently, meant only for those who understood how to see. Near the fence, there hung a single object that few people noticed at first glance. It was placed neatly, not hidden, not displayed proudly either. To the family, it was not decoration. It was a reminder. They passed by it every day without stopping, just as one might pass a familiar tree or stone. Its meaning was so deep that it no longer needed explanation among them. Most outsiders never understood what it was. They saw it as something old, maybe even strange, and moved on. But for those who knew, it carried weight. It spoke of promises made long ago, of respect between people and land, and of lessons taught through generations. It was not meant to threaten. It was meant to protect through understanding. As days passed quietly, the family continued their work, unaware that they were being watched from a distance. Somewhere beyond the open fields, eyes had noticed the ranch. Those eyes did not see the long history or the quiet strength. They saw space, silence, and opportunity. They saw a place where no one would notice if trouble came and went. To them, the ranch looked like an easy place, untouched and unguarded. The absence of noise and movement suggested weakness, not peace. They did not understand that some places remain quiet because they are respected, not because they are afraid. The family sensed nothing unusual. The animals behaved normally, the wind felt the same, and the sky showed no sign of change. Supper was prepared as usual, stories were shared, and plans for the next day were made. The night arrived gently, covering the land in darkness and calm. Inside the house, a small lamp glowed softly. Outside, the fence stood quietly, holding its simple shape against the land. The object hanging there moved slightly with the breeze, just enough to catch the moonlight. It did not shine, but it was visible to anyone who came close enough to look. This ranch, so simple and open, carried more than it showed. Its strength did not come from walls or weapons, but from meaning, memory, and belief. The family trusted that what had protected this land before would continue to do so, without noise or force. As the night deepened, the ranch rested, unaware that it was about to be tested. The silence remained unbroken, but not empty. It held its breath, waiting for the moment when appearance and truth would finally meet. The group that noticed the ranch had been moving from place to place for some time. They watched quietly from a distance, staying out of sight, studying the land as if it were a map laid open before them. To them, the ranch looked like many others they had seen before, remote, quiet, and far from help. The long, empty space around it suggested that no one would come if something went wrong. That distance made them feel bold. They talked among themselves in low voices, pointing toward the house and the fence. One of them laughed softly, saying the place looked too peaceful to offer any resistance. Another agreed, noting the lack of lights, guards, or signs of caution. In their minds, silence meant weakness. They believed that people who lived so quietly must also live without protection. As evening approached, they decided to move closer. They waited until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in dull colors when shadows grew longer and details softened. This was the time they trusted most, when shapes blurred and confidence grew. They moved carefully but without fear, stepping across the open land as if they already owned it. The closer they came, the more certain they felt. The house did not change, the fence remained simple, and no one stepped outside to challenge them. The animals continued their normal sounds, calm and unaware. Everything seemed to confirm what they believed, that the ranch was open and unprepared. They spoke of how quickly it would be over. One of them said they would take what they wanted and leave before the night grew old. Another talked about how no one would even remember the place by morning. Their words carried pride, not caution. None of them suggested turning back. As they crossed the property line, a strange stillness settled around them. The wind that had followed them across the field seemed to slow. Their footsteps sounded louder than expected, each step pressing into the dirt with a weight that suddenly felt heavier. They ignored the feeling and moved on, brushing it aside as imagination. They reached the fence and paused, not because they were stopped, but because something caught their attention. At first, they could not explain what it was. It was not movement or sound, but presence. Their eyes shifted along the fence, scanning it more carefully than before. One of them noticed it first. He lifted his hand slightly, signaling the others to stop. His face changed, losing its earlier confidence. The others followed his gaze and the group grew quiet. The laughter that had carried them forward disappeared. Hanging on the fence was something pale, moving gently in the evening breeze. It was placed carefully, not torn or neglected. The color stood out against the darkening land, clear and unmistakable. Even those who did not fully understand its meaning felt its weight. They stood there longer than they intended, frozen by a feeling they had not expected. The air felt different now, heavier, as if the land itself had noticed them. No one spoke at first. Each of them searched their memory, trying to recall stories they had heard, warnings passed down in half-forgotten words. One of them finally whispered what the others were thinking. He spoke slowly, unsure, as if saying the words out loud might make them more real. The object on the fence was not random. It was not placed there by accident. It carried meaning, old and deep. Doubt began to spread among them. The easy plan they had made now felt thin and weak. They looked around, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. The open land that once felt like freedom now felt like a stage where they were being watched, even though no one was visible. They wondered about the people who lived here. Were they truly as unprotected as they seemed? Or had they placed their trust in something the group did not understand? The calm of the ranch no longer looked like carelessness. It looked deliberate. Each of them felt a quiet pressure, not from fear alone, but from respect they did not expect to feel. The stories they had heard growing up, the ones they had ignored or laughed at, returned to them now with surprising force. Some signs were not meant to scare, but to remind. One of the group suggested moving on. His voice lacked the certainty it had earlier. Another hesitated, torn between pride and caution. No one wanted to be the first to admit they were wrong, yet none of them wanted to take another step forward. The fence, so simple before, now felt like a boundary that should not be crossed lightly. The object hanging there did not block their path, but it blocked their confidence. It asked a silent question. Did they truly understand where they stood? They listened for sounds from the house, expecting a door to open or a voice to call out. Nothing happened. The ranch remained quiet, unchanged, as if waiting. That waiting felt more powerful than any shout or threat. Time seemed to slow. What should have been a quick moment stretched into something longer and heavier. Each of them felt the weight of choice settle in. They were no longer thinking only of gain, but of consequence. In the end, they stepped back slightly, not fully retreating but no longer advancing. Their plan had cracked. The land they thought was empty had spoken without words, and in that silence, the group realized that some places were protected not by force, but by meaning they did not dare to challenge. They remained there for a while longer, uncertain and unsettled, knowing that whatever decision they made next would not be as simple as they had believed when they first saw the ranch from afar. The group stood near the fence longer than they expected. The quiet did not break, and no one came out to stop them. Still, none of them felt ready to move forward. The pale object on the fence stayed in their sight, gently shifting with the air, calm and steady. It did not threaten them, yet it made them feel small, as if they had stepped into a place where their usual rules did not apply. One of them slowly stepped closer, not crossing the fence, just leaning forward enough to see it clearly. His breath slowed as recognition settled in. He had seen something like this once before, many years ago, hanging outside an old place his grandfather had warned him about. Back then, he had been told to show respect and walk away. At the time, he did not understand why. Now, standing here, the memory returned with sharp clarity. He stepped back and shook his head slightly. The others noticed. They watched his face, reading the doubt in his eyes. This was not fear in the usual sense. It was something deeper, something tied to respect and old understanding. He did not need to explain much. They could feel it too. The land around them seemed to listen. The grass moved softly, the animals remained calm, and the house stood quiet in the distance. Nothing rushed them, yet the stillness pressed on them like a question waiting for an answer. The group had come expecting quick action, but now they were caught in a moment that demanded thought. They began to speak quietly, choosing words carefully, as if raising their voices might disturb something unseen. One of them asked who would place such an item so openly if they had nothing behind it. Another wondered what kind of people lived here, trusting something so meaningful instead of locks or guards. Slowly, their earlier confidence drained away. The ranch no longer felt empty. It felt watched, not by eyes but by memory. The fence felt less like a simple line of wood and wire and more like a boundary shaped by time. Crossing it now felt like more than a step forward. It felt like a choice that could not be undone. One of the group suggested waiting until full darkness. He thought maybe the feeling would fade when they could no longer see the object clearly. But even as he said it, he knew it was not true. The meaning was already inside them. Darkness would not remove it. They stood there, caught between pride and caution. Turning back felt like failure. Moving forward felt like crossing something sacred without permission. The stories they had ignored for years now stood beside them, alive and demanding attention. These were stories about land that remembered, about signs placed for a reason, about consequences that did not arrive loudly but stayed long. Far away, inside the house, the family continued their evening. They spoke quietly, sharing simple moments, unaware of the exact thoughts happening near the fence. Yet they felt calm. They trusted the land and what it carried. This trust was not careless. It was built over years of listening and learning. The object on the fence had been placed there long ago, following guidance passed down through generations. It was not meant to scare strangers or show power. It was meant to mark respect. Those who understood would pause. Those who did not would reveal themselves. Back at the fence, one of the group took a slow breath and made a decision. He said they should leave. His voice was steady, not weak. He explained that some places were not meant to be taken from, no matter how easy they looked. He reminded them that not every warning came with noise or force. There was resistance at first. One person argued that they had already come this far. Another said they should not let old stories control them, but their words lacked strength. The land did not support their argument. The quiet did not agree. They looked once more toward the house. No lights flashed suddenly. No doors opened. The ranch remained still, patient. That patience felt powerful. It suggested confidence, not fear. It suggested that whatever protected this place did not need to rush. Slowly, one by one, they stepped away from the fence. The movement felt strange, like leaving something unfinished. Yet with each step back, the pressure eased slightly. Their breathing became more natural. The land felt less heavy. They did not turn their backs immediately. They watched the fence and the pale object until distance softened its shape. Even then, they could still feel its meaning. It stayed with them, settling into their thoughts. As they moved farther away, the ranch returned to silence, unchanged. The fence stood as it always had. The object continued to move gently with the air. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been disturbed. The group walked without speaking for a long time. Each person was lost in thought, questioning how close they had come to making a choice they would regret. They realized that what stopped them was not fear of being caught, but fear of disrespecting something they did not fully understand. By the time they reached the edge of the open land, the ranch looked small again, just a shape under the darkening sky. Yet it no longer felt weak. It felt complete, whole, and protected in a way they could not challenge. Behind them, the land settled back into its quiet rhythm. The animals rested. The wind moved freely. The house stood firm. The ranch had faced a test, not with action but with meaning. And those who came believing they could take without consequence left carrying something unexpected. A reminder that true strength does not always stand in plain sight, and that some boundaries exist not to be crossed, but to be respected. The group kept moving until the ranch was far behind them, but the feeling did not leave so easily. Even when the land around them looked ordinary again, their thoughts stayed heavy. No one spoke for a long time. Each step away from the ranch felt like distance from something important, something they could not name but knew they should not forget. As they walked, memories began to surface. One of them remembered an old man from his childhood who used to speak about signs and respect. Back then, those words had sounded old and useless. Now they felt real. Another thought about how many places they had passed through without ever stopping to think about what those places meant to someone else. The ranch had forced them to pause, and that pause had changed them. Behind them, the ranch remained quiet. Inside the house, the family finished their evening meal. They cleaned up slowly, unhurried. The children listened as the elders spoke about the next day's work and the changing season. Their voices were calm, steady, shaped by years of simple living. None of them sensed danger or fear. They trusted the night as much as they trusted the morning. The elder of the family stepped outside for a moment before sleep. He looked across the land, breathing in the cool air. The stars were bright, spread across the sky like countless small fires. He did not look toward the fence with worry. He looked with familiarity. He knew what hung there and why it was there. He nodded slightly, as if greeting an old friend, then returned inside. That object had been placed on the fence many years ago, following a moment of deep meaning. Long before the ranch had taken its present shape, the land had been shared by people who believed strongly in balance and respect. When the rare event connected to that object happened, it was not celebrated loudly. It was honored quietly. The decision to place it on the fence was not made to warn, but to remind. The family had inherited not just land, but responsibility. They were taught that some things are protected by belief and care, not by force. The fence was not meant to stop people physically. It marked a line of understanding. Those who crossed it without respect would carry that choice with them. As the night deepened, the ranch slept peacefully. The animals rested, sensing no threat. The wind moved softly across the fields. Nothing felt disturbed. The land had held firm without struggle. Far away, the group finally stopped walking. They sat down, tired not just in body but in mind. One of them broke the silence, saying that they had been lucky. Another corrected him gently, saying it was not luck. It was a lesson. They nodded, understanding that they had been given a chance to walk away before doing something they could not take back. They spoke about how easily they had judged the ranch by its appearance. Quiet had looked like weakness. Simplicity had looked like lack. Now they saw how wrong that thinking was. Strength did not always announce itself. Sometimes it waited calmly, trusting that those who needed to understand would. As they rested, the image of the pale object on the fence returned again and again in their thoughts. It did not feel frightening anymore. It felt steady. It felt like a boundary drawn not in anger but in wisdom. When they finally stood up to move on, their direction changed. They chose a path that led away from places like that ranch. They did not say it out loud, but something inside them had shifted. They were more careful now, more aware that land carried stories, and that not all stories were theirs to touch. Back at the ranch, morning came gently. The sun rose over the fields, painting the land in warm light. The family woke as they always did. Work began again, simple and honest. The fence still stood. The object still hung there, unchanged, catching the morning light briefly before blending back into the quiet scene. The family did not speak about protection or danger. They spoke about weather, animals, and plans for the day. Yet everything they did was shaped by respect for what had been passed down to them. They understood that protection does not always come from action. Sometimes it comes from living in a way that honors the past. As days passed, the ranch continued its calm rhythm. Travelers came and went. Most never noticed the fence closely. Some did and paused. Those who paused often felt something they could not explain. They left with a sense of calm or thoughtfulness or quiet respect. The land remained open but not empty. It carried memory. It carried meaning. And because of that, it stood strong without needing to show force. What had happened that night did not become a story told loudly. It did not need to. Its impact lived quietly in the choices made afterward, both by those who lived on the ranch and those who had once approached it with the wrong intentions. The ranch remained what it had always been, a place of peace, shaped by belief, protected by understanding, and grounded in the quiet power of respect. Time passed, and the night at the ranch slowly became a quiet memory, not spoken about but never forgotten. For the family, life continued as it always had. The land still asked for care, the animals still needed attention, and the seasons still moved forward in their steady way. Nothing on the surface had changed, yet something deeper had been confirmed. The trust they placed in the land and in the meaning passed down to them had held firm. The family did not celebrate what had happened. They did not feel proud or victorious. Instead, they felt grateful. Grateful that no harm had come, grateful that respect had been shown without words, and grateful that the lesson behind the old tradition still mattered in a changing world. To them, this was how things were meant to work. Quiet understanding was better than conflict. Walking away was better than taking. The elder often thought about how close the land had come to being disturbed. He did not dwell on it with fear, but with reflection. He believed that every place had moments when it was tested. Not all tests were loud or dramatic. Some arrived quietly, asking simple questions about values and choices. That night had been one of those moments. He shared gentle reminders with the younger ones, not about danger, but about responsibility. He spoke of how symbols carried meaning only when people lived in a way that honored them. The object on the fence was not powerful by itself. Its strength came from the respect behind it and the life lived around it every day. The children listened, not fully understanding yet but feeling the weight of his words. One day they would carry those lessons forward just as he had. The land would remember them too. Far away, the group who had approached the ranch continued on their own paths. They did not return to places like that again. Each of them carried the experience differently, but all felt changed by it. Some became quieter, more thoughtful. Others began to question choices they had once made without care. That single pause at the fence had followed them longer than they expected. One of them later told someone about a place where silence felt stronger than walls. He did not explain much, only that some signs were not meant to be challenged. The story spread softly, losing details but keeping its heart. It became one of those stories people listened to more than once, even if they pretended not to believe it. Back at the ranch, seasons turned. The fields changed color, animals were born and grew strong, and the house aged gently with time. The fence remained standing, repaired when needed, just like everything else. The object hanging there stayed in its place, not as a warning but as a quiet marker of meaning. Occasionally, someone would stop near the fence and ask about it. The family never gave long explanations. They answered simply, saying it was important to them and to the land. Some nodded and moved on. Others paused longer, sensing that the short answer held more than words could explain. The ranch gained a quiet reputation, not a fearful one but a respectful one. People spoke of it as a place that felt calm, a place where you felt watched over in a gentle way. No one tried to take advantage of its openness again. The land seemed to ask for courtesy, and most people gave it willingly. As years went by, the story of the ranch blended into the many unseen stories carried by the land. It was not written down or recorded. It lived in memory, in choices made, and in paths not taken. That was enough. The family grew older. New hands took on old tasks. The lessons remained the same. Respect the land. Listen more than you speak. Trust what has been proven by time. They understood that strength did not need to announce itself. It only needed to be real. On quiet evenings when the sky opened wide and the stars returned, the ranch felt complete. The wind moved through the grass, the animals settled, and the fence stood as it always had. The object on it caught the light now and then faded back into the scene, exactly where it belonged. The land had been tested and had answered without sound. Those who listened understood. Those who did not were guided away before harm could be done. In this way, balance was kept. The true power of the ranch was never about defense or fear. It was about living with meaning, honoring what came before, and trusting that respect, when placed honestly, could protect more than force ever could. And so the ranch remained, quiet and open under the wide sky, carrying its story without needing to tell it, standing as a reminder that some boundaries are strongest when they are built from understanding rather than walls.